In the darkest days of the Great Depression, black unemployment soared to 50%, and desperate families were turned away from white-only charities. Yet entire neighborhoods still ate, thanks to an underground network built in the pews and kitchens of black churches. These faith-driven food banks didn't just fill plates. They built a survival system America still relies on today. How did they do it? And why are they still carrying this weight? The answers begin with a crisis that most history books left out. Numbers told the story long before the headlines caught up. In cities like Chicago, Memphis, and Atlanta, half of black men and women stood idle at the height of the Great Depression. Factories closed their doors, rail yards emptied, and fields that once offered a living now held only dust and broken promises. When jobs vanished, so did the safety nets. Charities that claimed to serve the needy drew hard color lines, turning away black families at the door. In Memphis, 3 out of every 4 private charities were run by churches, almost all of them white, and almost all refusing aid to black applicants. Even the American Red Cross, a name tied to relief in every disaster, declared unemployment an act of man and left black communities to fend for themselves. Government programs promised hope, but the fine print told another story. The Agricultural Adjustment Act, meant to rescue Southern farmers, handed money to white landowners while evicting black sharecroppers by the thousands. In Mississippi and Alabama alone, nearly 192,000 black families lost their homes and livelihoods, forced off the land to make way for federally subsidized fallow fields. In urban neighborhoods, black workers were the first fired and the last hired, squeezed out of jobs as porters, laborers, and even trash collectors by city policies and white pressure groups. In Atlanta, the Black Shirts movement marched to keep black workers out of paid labor entirely. Relief never matched the need. In New York City, bread lines stretched for blocks, but black families were often invisible in the lines that counted. White Protestant women's societies ran hospitals, orphanages, and soup kitchens, but only for their own. The numbers are stark. While white unemployment hovered around 25%, black unemployment soared to double that, with some neighborhoods reporting 60% out of work. Donations to black churches plummeted by half, even as the demand for help doubled. By 1933, church benevolence funds, money set aside for the poor, were the first to be cut, leaving pastors and deacons scrambling to stretch every dollar, every bag of flour, every pound of beans. For black families, there was no rescue coming from outside. The formal systems of aid had locked their doors. What remained was a patchwork of hope stitched together by faith, where survival depended not on government checks or charity handouts, but on the quiet determination of congregations who refused to let their neighbors starve. The hard truth was this: exclusion was not just a matter of policy or prejudice, it was a matter of daily hunger, measured in empty plates and silent kitchens. In that void, black churches became the lifeline, not by choice, but by necessity. Long before food stamps or government rations, survival rested on the shoulders of those who remembered the taste of hunger. In the memory of one elder, Sunday was not just a day of worship, but a day when the whole street gathered around a single table. The church kitchen, filled with the scent of collard greens and cornbread, stretched its reach far beyond the sanctuary walls. Pots simmered from sunrise, and the line at the door never seemed to end. Children, neighbors, and strangers alike found a place. No questions asked. There was a quiet system to it, practiced for generations. Deacon boards kept track of which families had lost a job or missed a meal. Names were spoken softly behind closed doors, so no one felt shame. The Mother's Auxiliary, a circle of women who knew every recipe by heart, cooked for hours, turning donated bags of beans and rice into feasts. Some Sundays, the food ran out before the crowd did, but no one was sent away empty-handed. If there was nothing left in the kitchen, someone would slip a few coins or a half loaf of bread into a waiting hand. Then there was the pounding. On those weeks when a family fell on hard times, a father laid off, a mother taken sick, the congregation would gather what they could. Each person brought a pound of flour, sugar, coffee, beans, whatever their own pantry could spare. These gifts arrived quietly, left on a porch, or handed over with a nod, never with a speech. The point was not charity, but kinship. It was a way to say, we see you, you belong. One elder, now in her 90s, still recalls the sound of footsteps on her childhood porch. She remembers sacks of potatoes and tins of lard arriving when her father lost his job at the railroad. She says that they never went to bed hungry. Not once. The church made sure of that. And when their turn came, they gave back what they could. These acts of care were not written in church bulletins or recorded in ledgers. They lived in the stories passed down, in the recipes taught by hand, in the memory of neighbors who became family. The pounding was more than a tradition. It was a promise renewed week after week that no one would face hardship alone. Through these small, steady offerings, Black churches built a network of survival woven from faith, pride, and the certainty that every meal shared was a victory against the world's indifference. Inside the church, the work of feeding families began long before sunrise. The Mother's Auxiliary gathered in the kitchen, tying aprons and rolling up sleeves, each woman knowing her place in a routine that ran like clockwork. Their names rarely appeared in church records, but their hands shaped every meal. Cooking schedules rotated week by week, a different group of women each Sunday, with recipes memorized and passed down, adjusted to whatever was donated or grown. On the stove, pots of beans and greens simmered beside trays of cornbread, all stretched to feed whoever came through the door. Down the hall, the deacon board met quietly in the pastor's study. Their ledgers, worn from years of use, told the real story of the congregation. Each page listed families, addresses, and sometimes a single word: sick, laid off, widow. Deacons split up the neighborhood, making home visits after Sunday service, checking discreetly on who needed help. No one wanted to be singled out. If a family's cupboards were bare, the deacons made a note, never speaking names aloud in public. At the next meeting, the board would decide how to help. A basket of groceries left on a porch, an envelope with a few dollars tucked into a hymnal, or a quiet word with the Mother's Auxiliary to prepare an extra plate. Pastors carried their own burden. When the offering plate came back light, they still found ways to pay the grocer or settle the butcher's bill for a family in trouble. Sometimes the money came from their own pockets, sometimes from a line in the church's ledger marked benevolence. These payments were never announced from the pulpit. They happened in the back office, receipts folded into a Bible, a promise kept in secret. Tithes and offerings kept the system running, even when giving meant going without. Members who had lost jobs still gave a dime or a quarter, believing that a full plate for one meant hope for all. The church's accounts showed the strain, collections cut in half by 1933, but the need for aid doubled, yet the rhythm of giving never stopped. Every small gift was counted, every penny stretched, every need weighed against what the church could spare. Outside, church gardens turned patches of donated land into rows of collards, sweet potatoes, and okra. Men and women worked the soil together, planting in spring and harvesting in late summer. The bounty filled the kitchen, and the surplus went to families who needed it most. These gardens weren't just for food. They were a symbol of self-reliance, a quiet answer to a world that refused to help. None of these systems were perfect, and the records often left more questions than answers. But the network held. The Mother's Auxiliary, the Deacon Board, the pastor, and every member who tithed or tilled the earth formed a chain that kept hunger at bay. Each part relied on the others, and every decision was shaped by privacy, dignity, and the stubborn belief that nobody in the community should go without a meal. In the basement of Brown Chapel, a ME church, the work began before sunrise. The mothers bored peeled potatoes, stirred beans, and organized donated food into neat rows along folding tables. Deacons moved crates of bread and apples from the back door, their steps steady and sure. In March 1965, as the Selma marchers gathered, these kitchens became the movement's backbone. Feeding 25,000 people was a test of faith and logistics, and the church rose to meet it. Volunteers from across Alabama and beyond arrived with carloads of canned beans, sacks of rice, and boxes of fruit. The menu shifted with each delivery, but the rhythm never broke. Every meal was a quiet promise. No marcher would go hungry, no matter how long the road. A movement historian describes the scene as a supply chain rivaling any city kitchen. Behind the headlines, church basements buzzed with purpose. After the marchers moved on, the same kitchens fed local families, civil rights workers, and children whose parents had lost jobs for speaking out. An organizer put it simply, the movement marched on a full stomach, and the church made sure of it. Years later, the crisis changed shape. In the 1980s, the crack epidemic swept through black neighborhoods, leaving hunger in its wake. School lunch programs fell short, and government aid was slow to arrive. Churches stepped in again, opening their doors to children after school. In Chicago, Detroit, and New Orleans, basement kitchens filled with the smell of chicken and rice, peanut butter sandwiches, and powdered milk. Grandmothers and volunteers cooked for lines of children, some of whom had not eaten since breakfast. For many, the only hot meal came from a church kitchen. A survivor from Detroit remembers walking with her siblings straight from school to the church on the corner. The line stretched down the block, but inside the welcome was warm. She remembers Miss Laverne always made sure we had seconds if we were still hungry. No one asked questions. The only records kept were to know how much to cook and who might need extra to take home. These programs ran on volunteer chains, women and men balancing jobs, families, and church duties to keep meals coming. Some churches partnered with local grocers or black-owned farms for fresh produce. Others relied on what members could spare, a bag of rice, a carton of eggs, a few dollars from the offering plate. Even when federal funding dried up, the kitchen stayed open, powered by faith and determination. Through every crisis, the church adapted, feeding thousands in a week or a handful each night. The blueprint never changed: dignity and discretion, and a hot meal offered to anyone in need. That legacy endures, alive in every modern pantry and meal program run by black churches today. The numbers today are as sobering as any memory from the past. According to the latest USDA data, nearly 1 in 4 black households in America struggles with food insecurity. For families with children, the rate climbs to 31%. In practical terms, that means millions of kitchen tables where the question is not what's for dinner, but whether there will be dinner at all. The gap is not a relic of history. It is 3 times wider than what most white households face. Grocery prices rise, wages lag behind, and safety nets fray at the edges, but the hunger remains constant. In neighborhoods from Baltimore to Baton Rouge, the lines outside food pantries stretch longer every year. Black churches now operate nearly a third of all community food pantries in the country. That is not just a statistic, it is a measure of need that persists, no matter how many government programs are launched or how many promises are made. The work is as relentless as ever, sorting cans, stacking boxes, and offering a warm meal to anyone who walks through the door. Each percentage point is a story of a mother skipping breakfast so her children can eat, of elders rationing medicine to afford groceries, of Sunday dinners that fill the gap left by empty shelves at home. Behind every number is a decision made in a church basement or a pantry hallway. The math is simple, but the reality is not. The need remains, and the burden falls on the same shoulders that have carried it for generations. A policy scholar sits with the numbers and the history, tracing the roots of hunger in Black communities back through decades of official neglect. She points to the fine print of relief laws, how the first food stamps left out farm laborers and domestic workers, jobs held mostly by Black men and Black women. Even today, she explains, federal programs like SNAP are riddled with loopholes and limits. Eligibility shifts with the political wind. In some states, a missed paycheck or a single mistake on a form can mean weeks without help. The safety net, she says, was never designed to catch everyone. It was built with holes, and Black families have always felt the drop. Down the street, a pastor unlocks the pantry door for the third time this week. He remembers when a few shelves of canned goods were enough. Now the line stretches out the door every Saturday. The church budget cannot keep up. Donations ebb and flow, but the need stays constant. He has watched SNAP benefits shrink while grocery prices climb. We do what we can, he says, but we are not magicians. We are tired. The scholar asks why, after a century of government programs, the burden still falls on churches. The pastor wonders how long his congregation can carry it. Both see the same pattern. When policy fails, faith fills the gap. But neither believes it should be this way. They call it what it is, a system that relies on exhaustion, not justice.
Today, with nearly 1 in 4 Black households still facing food insecurity, these church kitchens remain more than tradition. They are necessity. Government programs shift, but hunger endures. The question isn't how communities survive, but why they still must. Until justice is more reliable than charity, the pews will keep filling the gap. What would it take to finally make their work obsolete? Share your thoughts below.